Log entry, December 16, 1944, 5:42 hours sector, Schnee Eifel Ridge, Ardennes, Belgium Panzer Division, forward armored element, Tigergruppe Eberhardt. The snow had fallen all night, thick and wet, blurring the horizon into a sheet of grey silence broken only by the guttural rumble of Maybach HL-230 engines turning over in the cold. It was still half dark, and the world seemed to hold its breath as the forest shuddered under the weight of the coming offensive. Inside the lead tiger eye of the column, the temperature hung just above freezing, the smell of oil and damp canvas mixing with sweat and steel. Feldwebel Otto Kramer, 32, veteran of Kursk, 3 years in the Armored Corps, ran a gloved hand across the periscope's frosted lens, squinting through the gloom. His tank, Tiger 214, had survived 11 direct hits from Shermans, 2 bazooka strikes, and 1 terrifying close encounter with a British Firefly in Normandy. Nothing had ever truly threatened it. Not until now. He didn't know it yet, but the invincibility that had carried him through 3 campaigns was about to die before morning's end. The American line lay just beyond the tree line, a thin, unsuspecting screen of the 99th Infantry Division, and behind them, the armored support of the 3rd Armored. Intelligence called them green troops, replacements with winter coats too new, weapons still smelling of cosmoline. "We'll drive through them like snow," said Lieutenant Eberhardt, commander of the Tigergruppe, as he leaned out of his turret to survey the frozen landscape. "Ardennes will break before lunch." His voice was full of confidence, but Otto caught something else in it, an edge, a fatigue that had begun to live in all of them after too many years of marching east and west across a burning continent. Overhead, the sky was low and heavy, muffling sound. No aircraft, no artillery yet, only the faint ticking of frozen branches snapping under the weight of the snow. Somewhere to the south, Panzer Grenadiers moved silently along the road, boots crunching, weapons slung tight. Otto tapped the radio headset against his ear, listening to the chatter. It was clipped, professional, and calm. Call signs like Low, Panther, Wolf. Code words for death, rolling forward on steel treads. At 5:47, a sharp order cut through the static, "En riff begint." Attack begins. The Maybach roared to life, exhaust pluming black into the frozen air. The Tigers began to move, each 45-ton monster grinding forward in a rhythm that shook the ground. Snow melted in their wake, exposing the black mud beneath. Otto's loader, young Hans Vogel, only 19, hummed a nervous tune under his breath, something from home, from before the war. He'd been in combat less than a month. "Don't hum," Otto said quietly. "You'll need your ears." The boy stopped instantly, eyes wide. The gunner, Wilhelm Kessler, adjusted his sighting optics, the Zeiss lenses clear and precise. He could hit a moving Sherman at 1,000 meters without blinking. The radio cracked again, enemy armor reported near Krinkeltrachterath. Likely M4 Shermans, multiple platoons. Otto smirked. Shermans. Always Shermans. He'd lost count of how many he'd killed. Sometimes they didn't even know where the shot came from. He still remembered one in Normandy, a white star outlined in dust, turret turned sideways, crew scrambling out just before the second round turned the tank into an inferno. The Americans fought bravely, but their machines were toys, at least, that's what they believed for years. But today, hidden among the fog and pines, something new waited for them, something that could send a tungsten core through even the proud armor of a tiger. The first American shells came in at 6:02. Not many, just probing fire, high explosive rounds from 105s, distant and clumsy, landing in the tree line with dull, muffled thumps. The Tigers kept rolling. Their mission was simple: punch through, reach Elsenborn Ridge, and open the road for the infantry and fuel convoys. Otto felt the tank's vibration in his chest, the low growl of the engine like a living thing. "Target in sight," Kessler murmured. Through his gun sight, shapes emerged in the morning mist, Shermans, 2, maybe 3, parked hull down behind a rise. Their silhouettes looked almost ghostly against the snow. Range 800 meters. Fire. The Tiger's 88mm KWK-36 barked like thunder. The recoil slammed through the turret, and an orange flash lit the forest. The first round struck a Sherman dead center, punching through the glassy plate, sending the turret lid flying skyward in a plume of black smoke. "Hit confirmed," Kessler said calmly. A second shot followed. Another Sherman erupted, flames licking the air. "That's two," Otto said, watching through the periscope as the third American tank backed into the trees, disappearing. "Cowards," muttered Hans, loading another shell. "No," Otto said. "Not cowards. Survivors." He didn't know why he said it, it just came out, like an old truth surfacing through the noise. Then the world changed. At 6:11, a new sound cut through the morning, sharper, faster, higher pitched. A shell screamed overhead, a sound they'd never quite heard before. It hit the Tiger behind them, Tiger 217, just above the front sprocket, and in a flash, the 45-ton behemoth erupted in a burst of white fire. Otto froze. "What the hell was that?" someone shouted over the radio. No one answered. The wreck burned furiously, the tungsten jet having pierced the hull clean through. "That wasn't a Sherman," Kessler whispered. Otto adjusted the periscope. Down the slope, beyond the smoke, he saw the faint glint of something, long, low, with an open turret. It wasn't a Sherman. It was an M36 Jackson, the American tank destroyer armed with a 90mm gun. And that meant something else, the Americans had the new shells. M93 HVAP, Kessler muttered, as if naming a ghost. "We were told they had only a few." Otto's hands trembled on the controls. Apparently a few is enough. Another impact, this time closer. The round slammed into their right side, punching a crater into the armor but not penetrating. Sparks showered the turret interior. "Load heat." Otto barked. "Find that bastard." The loader slammed a shell into the breach. The gun fired, and the world shook. The Jackson vanished in smoke, but no explosion followed, missed. "Traverse left, he's moving," shouted Eberhard over the radio, his own Tiger engaging the flank. "These shells, they're punching through our armor like butter." In the chaos of snow and fire, one Tiger after another fell silent, not from the usual clang and rebound of ricochets, but from sudden, surgical holes punched clean through their hides. The impossible had happened, the Tiger was no longer invincible. Hans was crying now, his hands trembling as he reached for another shell. "Why are they still shooting?" "We hit them." "Because they can," Otto said coldly, his voice steady despite the storm outside. Another impact. This one penetrated. The interior filled with smoke and fragments of molten metal. Kessler screamed, his right arm shredded by shrapnel. Otto grabbed him, dragging him back, coughing through the acrid fumes. "Radio, call for retreat." Eberhardt's voice crackled through the headset, frantic, desperate. "Pull back." "Repeat, Tigergruppe falls Zurich." "The unthinkable order." "Retreat." The Tigers, once the kings of the battlefield, were now prey. Otto grabbed him, dragging him back, coughing through the acrid fumes. "Radio, call for retreat." Eberhardt's voice crackled through the headset, frantic, desperate. "Pull back." "Repeat, Tigergruppe falls Zurich." "The unthinkable order." "Retreat." The Tigers, once the kings of the battlefield, were now prey. Otto reversed hard, the treads grinding through mud and fire. Through the periscope, he saw Eberhardt's Tiger take a hit through the turret ring, one clean strike, and erupt in a white flash that split the morning. The turret blew off, landing upside down in the snow. Eberhardt was gone. For the first time since the war began, Otto felt fear. Not for his life, but for the truth of it all, the realization that the world had changed overnight. Across the ridge, American gunners reloaded with calm precision, their tungsten-cored M93 shells gleaming under the low light. These weren't the crude, bouncing shells of the early war. These were the future. He had heard rumors, stories from prisoners, whispers about new ballistics, higher muzzle velocities, even sabot rounds, but he hadn't believed them. Not until now. He ordered the driver to take them back behind the tree-line. They crawled into cover, the engine whining, the smell of burned oil thick in their throats. The forest echoed with dying machines. "They've found a way through us," Hans said quietly, his voice cracking. Otto didn't answer. He looked at Kessler, who was bleeding out on the turret floor. The man's breath came in short, shallow gasps. "Tell my wife," Kessler whispered, "that the tiger died first." Otto clenched his jaw. "No one dies first," he said, but his voice trembled. Radio silence fell over the net. Only static now, broken occasionally by bursts of panic, then nothing. The German advance had stalled before it began. The fog lifted slightly, revealing the blackened hulks of the tigers, smoke twisting into the morning sky like dying ghosts. Otto climbed out of the turret, breaking protocol. The order was clear: no one leaves the vehicle under fire. But he couldn't stay inside, not with the heat, the smoke, the smell of blood. He stepped into the open, snow crunching beneath his boots, the wind biting at his face. Across the clearing, a single Jackson sat still, gun barrel smoking, the white star on its hull faint under a layer of frost. Its commander stood exposed, binoculars raised, scanning for movement. For a moment, their eyes met, two men separated by nothing but snow and history. Then the American lowered his glasses, turned, and vanished into the mist. Otto didn't raise his weapon. He couldn't. Something inside him broke, the belief, the arrogance, the faith in the machine that had carried them through hell. It was gone now, melted away in the cold. He turned back toward his wrecked tiger, laying his hand on the scorched armor. The steel was still warm. By 7:30, the first German reinforcements arrived, Panther tanks, half-tracks, and infantry. They found the burned remains of Tigergruppe Eberhardt scattered across a kilometer of forest road. Out of 6 tigers, only one could still move, Otto's. He climbed back inside, numb, silent. The engine coughed, then caught. They limped westward, toward St. Vith, the snow now falling harder, erasing the tracks of what had just happened. In his logbook, Otto wrote a single line: "New American shell, penetrated 120 mm frontal plate." Impossible. He underlined the word 3 times, as if doing so would make it less true. The radio carried faint voices, reports of similar losses near Bastogne, near Houffalize, near every place the Tigers had once ruled. The Americans had found their equalizer. And as the day wore on, the legend of the Tiger began to die, not in explosions or fire, but in disbelief, in the quiet realization that war had evolved beyond pride. Otto closed his eyes, hearing the engine hum beneath him, feeling the machine that had once made him invincible. Now it was just steel. Just weight. Just history. They limped westward, toward St. Vith, the snow now falling harder, coating the battered hull of the Tiger in white that hissed and melted against the lingering heat of the armor. The forest around them had turned ghostly, shapes dissolving in the mist, the world reduced to shades of gray and the low mechanical heartbeat of the Maybach engine. Inside the tank, Otto's ears rang from the concussion of earlier hits, his mouth tasted of cordite and iron. Hans sat hunched beside the ammunition racks, eyes blank, hands raw and trembling as he repacked shells that would probably never be fired again. Kessler lay across the turret floor, pale, breathing shallowly, a strip of field dressing soaked red around the stump of his arm. The metallic smell filled every inch of the compartment, mingling with oil and sweat until the air itself felt heavy. "Hold on," Otto said quietly, not sure if he meant it for Kessler or himself. The boy at the radio, Gefreiter Adler, kept twisting the frequency dial, searching for a voice in the static. "Command's gone," he muttered, eyes darting. "Everyone's gone." The static answered him like a ghost. Outside, the forest roared with distant thunder, artillery from both sides, rolling in overlapping waves that turned the horizon into a dull flickering glow. The Bulge offensive was beginning in full, but for Otto and his crew, it already felt lost. The Tiger crested a low rise where the road curved along the ridge, and there they saw the wrecks, Panthers, half-tracks, a line of trucks burned to black skeletons. Snow fell on everything indiscriminately, erasing the insignia, covering friend and foe alike. Otto slowed, scanning the roadside. Somewhere out there, American spotters would be watching. "Stop here," he ordered. The tank idled, tracks creaking, exhaust fumes swirling. He climbed out again, ignoring regulation, ignoring the fact that he could be picked off by a sniper at any moment. The cold hit like a hammer. His breath fogged instantly, crystallizing on his scarf. He walked a few paces forward, crunching through snow, and knelt beside the ruin of another Tiger, its turret blown clean off, the number 223 still faintly visible beneath soot. He reached out, brushing ice from the steel, and his glove came away black. Inside the wreck, frozen solid, he saw the gunner's remains, eyes open, face half melted, caught mid-scream. Otto swallowed hard. For years they'd believed their armor was a wall between life and death. Now that wall had cracks, and through those cracks poured everything they had tried not to feel. The wind carried the distant whine of engines, American armor moving on the opposite slope. He could hear the difference now, the quicker diesel rhythm of Sherman's, the deeper note of the M36's big 90mm gun. "They're regrouping," Adler said from the hatch. "If they flank, we're finished." Otto nodded. "We'll move soon." But he didn't move. He just stared across the valley, where faint muzzle flashes winked like fireflies in the fog. He thought of Eberhard, his commander, the man who had sworn that no force on earth could kill a Tiger from the front. Eberhard was gone, vaporized by a shell whose name they had never even heard before that morning. He remembered the smell of breakfast coffee inside the command half-track an hour before the attack, the laughter, the certainty. All of it erased in moments. A faint crunch of snow behind him, Hans had followed him out, despite orders. The boy's face was streaked with soot and tears, eyes raw from smoke. "Herr Feldwebel," he said, voice shaking, "Kessler, he's gone." Otto looked down, then back toward the horizon. For a moment he didn't speak. Then he said softly, "He was the best gunner in the company." Hans nodded, wiping his face with his sleeve. "What do we do now?" Otto turned toward him, eyes hollow. "We finished the mission." "But there is no mission left," the boy whispered. Otto didn't answer. The snow kept falling, thickening into a curtain that swallowed everything. At 8-10 hours they moved again, threading through the pines toward St. Vith. Every kilometer felt longer than the last. They passed stragglers, infantrymen in white smocks trudging through drifts, carrying panzerfausts slung across their shoulders, eyes glazed with exhaustion. Some saluted the Tiger as it passed, as if the sight of its black cross could still mean protection. Others just stared, wordless, at the burned wrecks behind it. In the distance, the sharp crack of American 90mm fire echoed through the valley. Occasionally a shell burst somewhere ahead, throwing up fountains of snow and earth. Otto felt each detonation in his chest like a heartbeat gone wrong. By mid-morning they reached a narrow clearing near a frozen stream where elements of another German unit, Kampfgruppe, were massing for their own push. A young SS officer waved them down, his parka spotless, his face too clean for this place. "Tigergruppe," he called out. "Where is your commander?" Otto climbed halfway from the hatch, his expression flat. "Dead." The officer hesitated, then nodded stiffly. "You'll fall in with us. We need armor for the drive on Stavelot." Otto looked past him, at the long line of Panthers and half-tracks stretching into the fog, engines idling, men smoking, the smell of gasoline thick in the cold. He wanted to say no, to tell him that his Tiger was wounded, his crew shattered, but what was the point? Orders were orders. He gave a curt nod. "We'll follow." That afternoon, the offensive thundered west. Columns of armor rumbled through narrow Ardennes roads, engines echoing off the trees. The air was filled with the metallic clatter of treads on ice, the hiss of radio static, the occasional shout of a commander trying to keep his column in line. Somewhere ahead, American artillery began to answer, shells whistling overhead and bursting in the treetops. Snow and splinters rained down like shrapnel. Otto's hands moved automatically on the controls, eyes scanning for muzzle flashes, the machine around him becoming an extension of instinct. The Tiger's 88 still worked, the loader still loaded. War had its rhythm, and even in despair, the rhythm endured. They engaged again near midday, on the edge of a small Belgian hamlet, just a cluster of stone houses and a church spire half buried in snow. Through the gun sight, Otto saw movement, Shermans crossing the far field, their olive hulls barely visible against the haze. "Range 900, he said. The Tiger fired. One of the Shermans erupted in flame, its turret leaping like a kicked can. For a heartbeat, Otto felt the old power again, the predatory certainty that had once defined him. Then the return fire came. A flash from the left, a shriek, and the ground beside them erupted in white. Another round whined off their side armor, leaving a crater of molten metal. "Jackson's again!" Hans shouted. "They're everywhere." Otto traversed the turret, searching. Another flash, closer now, and the world exploded in light and sound. The Tiger rocked violently, the driver screamed that the left track was gone. Smoke filled the compartment, black and choking. "Bail out!" Otto shouted. They tumbled into the snow just as the second hit came. The Tiger shuddered, a geyser of flame bursting from the turret ring. The heat seared their faces. Hans stumbled backward, eyes wide. They moved through the forest like ghosts, the snow swallowing their tracks almost as soon as they made them, every sound dulled by the weight of the cold. The Ardennes trees stood tall and silent, their trunks black against the white. Otto's breath came in short bursts, vapor curling around his face as he led Hans downhill toward a stream frozen hard as glass. Behind them, the faint glow of their burning Tiger pulsed through the fog, an orange wound against the gray sky. Each step crunched softly, a rhythm broken only by the occasional distant rumble of guns, dull, rolling thunder that never truly stopped. The offensive was supposed to be lightning, a decisive strike, but already it felt bogged down, scattered, confused. In the last hour, Otto hadn't heard a single clear order over the radio, just fragments, shouts, static. Somewhere to the north, Paper's spearhead was pushing hard toward Stavelot, somewhere to the south, whole regiments were trapped by snow and fuel shortages. The great counterattack, Hitler's last gamble, was turning into chaos. "Herr Feldwebel," Hans whispered, "where are we going?" Otto didn't answer immediately. He looked up through the trees, gauging direction by instinct more than map. "West," he said finally. "Toward St. Vith. If the line holds, that's where they'll regroup." Hans nodded, though he didn't look convinced. His face was pale under the grime, his lips cracked from the cold. The boy had been a mechanic before the war, had probably never seen real combat until this month, and now he'd watched one of the most feared machines in history burn like a candle. They reached the stream and crossed cautiously, the ice groaning under their boots. On the other side, they found a narrow forest track half hidden by snow. Tire marks, fresh, heading north. Otto crouched, brushing snow away with his glove. "Half tracks," he muttered. "Maybe from our supply column." He stood, scanning the trees. The wind shifted, carrying with it the faint smell of fuel and smoke, not from battle, but from vehicles nearby. He motioned to Hans to follow, and they moved along the track, rifles slung, boots sinking deep. Every few steps Otto glanced over his shoulder, half expecting to see Americans coming through the fog. He didn't know if they were advancing here yet, but he could feel it, the inevitability of their approach. After 10 minutes, the forest opened into a small clearing. A dozen vehicles were parked in haphazard lines, trucks, 2 half-tracks, and a single Panzer IV with its engine cover open. Men milled around, some smoking, some sleeping against the wheels, others arguing quietly. They looked up as Otto and Hans emerged from the trees, their faces wary. A sergeant approached, MP-40 slung over his shoulder. "Which unit?" he demanded. "Panzerlehr," Otto said. "Tigergruppe Eberhardt." The man frowned. "There is no Tigergruppe anymore." Otto's expression didn't change. "There was this morning." The sergeant studied him for a long moment, then gave a curt nod. "You'll want to speak to Oberst Heller. He's in the truck." The Oberst was an older man, his greatcoat immaculate, his expression hard. He sat at a folding table with a map spread before him, a kerosene lamp flickering in the cold. He looked up as Otto entered. "Report," he said simply. Otto saluted. "Tigergruppe destroyed by new American anti-tank ammunition, west of Krinkelt. M36 Jacksons with tungsten cord HVAP rounds. Armor penetration beyond expectation." Heller's eyes narrowed. "How many losses?" 5 of 6 Tigers destroyed. "Cause?" "Frontal penetrations." The word hung in the air like a curse. Heller leaned back slowly, exhaling. "Frontal," he repeated. "Impossible." Otto didn't reply. The Oberst studied him for a long moment, then said quietly, "You're certain?" Otto nodded once. "I saw it." Heller rubbed his temples. "High Command insists the Americans don't have enough tungsten to field those rounds widely." Otto's voice was flat. "They have enough for today." For a moment there was only the sound of the wind against the canvas of the tent. Then Heller straightened, pushing the map toward Otto. "You'll stay with us until you're reassigned. We move again at dusk." Otto nodded, saluted, and turned to leave. Outside, Hans was waiting by a small fire, his hand stretched toward the flames. "They believe you?" he asked. "They have to," Otto said. "Belief won't change it." He sat beside the boy, letting the warmth creep into his numb fingers. Around them, soldiers spoke in low voices, some laughing, others silent. The fire crackled, sending sparks into the air. Otto stared into it, remembering the glow of the burning tank. The colors were the same. By late afternoon, snow began again, thicker this time, flakes falling in swirling sheets that blurred distance and sound. The column prepared to move, engines growling to life one by one. Otto found himself assigned to a half-track filled with infantry from the 12th Volksgrenadier Division. They looked at him with a mix of respect and unease. The black Panzer uniform still carried its old aura, even if the myth behind it had just died. Hans sat beside him, rifle across his knees. The vehicle lurched forward, the convoy snaking down the icy forest road. Through the open rear flap, Otto could see the pale shapes of tanks and trucks stretching into the mist, headlights dimmed, exhaust plumes rising like ghosts. Somewhere up ahead, the lead vehicle struck a mine, an explosion muffled by snow but powerful enough to shake the ground. The column halted instantly. Shouts rippled through the ranks. "Engineers! Stay off the road!" Men scattered into the ditches. Otto gripped his rifle, scanning the tree line. He half expected to see American paratroopers burst from the fog, but none came. Only the moaning wind. They waited an hour while the engineers cleared the path. During that time, Otto noticed something that chilled him more than the cold, the silence of morale. No singing, no jokes, no confident banter. These were not the armies of 1940 or even 1943. These were tired men fighting a war already lost, chasing rumors of wonder weapons and miracles that never came. Somewhere beyond the ridge, the Americans were regrouping, their artillery zeroing in, their air power waiting for the skies to clear. And when it did, the road ahead would become a killing ground. Otto knew it, though he said nothing. As dusk settled, the convoy began to move again, headlights hooded, engines rumbling softly. They reached a small village, houses dark, windows shattered, the church steeple broken in half by shellfire. The troops dismounted to take shelter for the night. Otto and Hans found an abandoned farmhouse near the edge of town. Inside, it was cold but dry. A few old photographs still hung on the wall, smiling Belgian faces from before the war. Hans stared at them for a long time. "Do you think they'll ever forgive us?" he asked. Otto didn't look up. He was cleaning his pistol, the motion mechanical. "Forgiveness doesn't matter," he said quietly. "Only survival." Hans sat down opposite him, arms wrapped around his knees. "I used to believe the tiger was invincible," he whispered. Otto glanced at him. So did everyone. Outside, the wind howled against the broken shutters. Later, as the night deepened, Otto couldn't sleep. He lay on the wooden floor, listening to the distant rumble of artillery, the soft breathing of the boy beside him. His mind replayed the battle in fragments, the flash of the M93 shell, the shockwave, the sudden silence after the explosion. He thought of Eberhardt's last words, half drowned in static, "Fall Zurich. Retreat." The words still burned in his ears. For years they'd been told to advance, to hold, to conquer. Retreat was unthinkable. Yet here they were, running. He turned his head and stared at the rafters above him, at the faint outlines of frost creeping along the beams. He wondered how many more days this war could drag on, how many more would die for nothing. At 3:20 hours, he was still awake when the first shells hit. The bombardment came suddenly, without warning, American artillery zeroing in on the village. The ground shook violently, windows shattered inward, and the night filled with the shriek of metal. Alarm, voices screamed outside. Otto leapt to his feet, dragging Hans toward the door. They burst outside into chaos, men running, vehicles roaring to life, explosions lighting the sky in orange bursts. Snow mixed with dirt and flame. "Back to the half-track." Otto shouted, but the vehicle was already a burning wreck. Another shell landed nearby, throwing them both to the ground. His ears rang, his vision blurred. Through the haze he saw shapes, figures moving at the edge of the village, silhouettes low and fast. American infantry. They were closer than he'd thought. Otto pulled Hans behind the wall of a barn, peering through a gap. He could see them now, dark outlines moving with practiced precision, rifles glinting in the flashes. "They've surrounded us," Hans whispered. Otto checked his pistol, counting the rounds. "Then we fight our way out." But even as he said it, he knew the truth. They were two men, half frozen, with barely enough ammunition to make a difference. Yet something in him refused to surrender, not out of ideology, but defiance, a refusal to die in panic. He raised his pistol, waited for the nearest figure to cross the open snow, and fired. The shot cracked through the night, echoed by the roar of answering fire. Bullets tore splinters from the wall around them. Hans returned fire with his rifle, the muzzle flashes lighting his terrified face. Snow exploded around them as tracers sliced the air. For minutes, or maybe hours, they held, until the rifle clicks became hollow. Otto looked down, his last magazine was empty. The boy's weapon was jammed. The firefight had moved on, but footsteps approached, slow, deliberate. American voices called out, sharp but not cruel. "Drop it. Hands up." Otto met Hans's eyes. The boy was shaking, tears freezing on his cheeks. Otto nodded once, slowly. Together they stepped from behind the wall, hands raised. The Americans surrounded them, young faces, steam rising from their mouths, eyes wary but not hateful. One of them, a sergeant with a white scarf around his neck, looked Otto over. "Panzer crew?" he asked. Otto nodded. The man studied him for a moment, then said quietly, "Hell of a machine you had out there." Otto glanced toward the burning horizon. "Not anymore." The sergeant motioned for his men to lower their weapons. "War's ending soon anyway," he said, almost to himself. Otto said nothing. He just stood there as snow began to fall again, soft and soundless, covering the tracks of both armies. The snow deepened, covering the wrecks, the blood, and the sound of battle. American troops led the prisoners toward the road, where Sherman's idled in a gray dawn. Otto looked back once at the burning village, the last trace of his tiger buried beneath the snow, along with every belief in its invincibility. Hans stumbled, weary, and an American soldier caught his arm. For a moment, captor and captive stood together in silence, breathing the same frozen air, two young men too tired to remember what victory meant. By winter's end, the Ardennes offensive had failed. Germany's final gamble had spent the last of its strength. The tigers that once ruled Europe now lay silent in the forest, destroyed not only by American fire, but by time and inevitability. The camera rose above the column of prisoners. Snow fell endlessly, soft and quiet, erasing the scars of war. No machine, no nation, no dream of conquest can stand forever against the weight of history. The music swelled, strings, distant drums, solemn yet calm. Fade to black. By May 1945, Germany surrendered unconditionally. Of all Tiger tanks deployed, fewer than 10% survived. Only a few remain today, cold, rusting relics of a world that burned itself to ash. The last note lingered. The war ended, but for those who lived through it, the echoes never did. Silence. Only the whisper of snow.